Okay, is this a good time to start?
Sure.
It's so great to see everyone here. Good evening. Welcome to our School of Business annual retreat. My name is Michael Gallagher. I'm the director of our Foster Leadership Center on campus. The Leadership Center is hosting the retreat in collaboration with our alumni on the School of Business Advisory Council, faculty, and students. Before we start, I'd like to invite everyone to mute yourselves unless you're speaking so as not to disrupt the event. I would also like to invite you to relax, unwind, and allow this time to be a respite away from what is undoubtedly a very stressful time for all of us. This is an opportunity to put our Franciscan values to work, guiding us through challenging issues we all face. I will also mention that on retreat, we are not professors, students, executives, or administrators. We are just people, equals. Hence, on retreat, we address each other with first names. Normally, of course, this retreat would be on Mount Irenaeus, but like everything else in today's new world, in a socially distant way, we are on Zoom. My mother used to tell me to try to see the good in everything. Perhaps being on Zoom has a silver lining because there are people with us tonight that would ordinarily not be able to participate, and that's a great thing. The topic this year, chosen by our students, is sexism in the workplace. We will hear four perspectives: the faculty, the alumni, the students, and the friars. After our four presenters share their insights, we will open the conversation up to general discussion. At this point, Advisory Board Council member and alumnus Connie Witten will give us a brief history of the retreat, and then I would like to invite our friars to lead us in an invocation, and we will begin. Connie?
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And thank you all for coming. Many of you have been with us before. The members of SOBEC have been probably the last 7 years working with students, the friars, and faculty to create an environment where the business students and others that have joined us can have a retreat, a quiet time to contemplate the values of Franciscan teachings, the business school learnings, and experience what it may be like once you leave the Bonnet campus and go out into an organization and have much more realistic offsites. This has actually become a strategic initiative that the dean has been sponsoring the last few years, which she'll talk a little bit about more later. The only thing I'd like to say is a special thank you to my co-chair, Mari, who has really stepped up and led this for us. And I really want to thank her for all her work to get us all together tonight, as well as the dean and the rest of the staff. For some of the SOBEC members that are just joining us for the first time tonight, I welcome them. And for those of you that have not been involved in the past, one of the tenets for us to do this is to really take the values that we look at almost every day. Many of you are going up those stairs and sometimes you might not look at them. I'm going to remind you very briefly, and you'll hear a lot more about them, of what those values are. We like to take the values from the wall and bring them to our retreat. So just very briefly, the values off the wall are contemplation, love, respect, joy, peace, and compassionate service. And you'll hear more about them later this evening. So I'm pleased to see all of us join you. Yep, it's a little different, Mike, than what we normally do. But then again, if anything, we have to be resilient and meet people where they're at, right? So thank you very much. And I think Dan or Kevin, will you lead us in invocation? Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. And just for a couple minutes, because this is a retreat, just ask you to lightly close your eyes for just a little bit. And just take a deep breath and let that go. And take another breath. And as you're breathing in all of those values: love and respect, peace, compassion, all that is good. And as you breathe out, let go of whatever is negative, whatever is stale, whatever is old, whatever is not helpful. So breathe in again. And know that you are loved, you're being held at this very, very minute by a loving Creator who can never, ever leave us, because we live and move and have our being in that Creator. And we're made in the divine image of that Creator. So, loving God, we pray and we thank you, first of all, for all of the very many different ways that each of us holds part of your face. Each of us reflect you in a certain way because we're made in your image. And differences in genders, or skin colors, or hair types, or any of the other things are all about just the wonderful, complex, and beautiful creation that you make. Help us to know that we are loved, and help us to also then bring that love out. And we ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kevin. Father Dan. First on our discussion tonight is Dean Matricia James, and I'm delighted that she's agreed to give her perspective on sexism. So I'll turn it over to you, Matricia.
Thank you, Mike. Do I have the ability to share screen? Yeah, I do. Thank you. Well, okay. So before I start, I want to thank Mike and faculty for allowing me to represent faculty. I don't get to do that very often. And I don't get to do classroom presentations, so I take the liberty to make slides for the students. And I want to take a moment before we go into sexism in the workplace and the specific definitions of it to acknowledge that this is not an attempt to box anyone into a particular category that he or she has not chosen for him or herself. So it doesn't ignore gender preference or gender identity. However, sexism in any place, sexism in general, is based on the perception of the other person on the target. So if I look like a woman, then the sexism will be applied to me. If my resume goes out and my name is Joe, then I won't experience that sexism, because when they look at the resume, it's a male resume, not female resume. So it's based on perception. And for that reason, you see people using finding different ways to put their name on resumes so they don't come across in ways that will lead to discrimination. And one other point, sometimes because people are so set on gender stereotypes, if you're a woman who acts outside of your gender role, meaning maybe I act too masculine, I will get backlash. Same thing for a man who shows more feminine traits than we might think are normal. He receives backlash, maybe not in the form of sexism, but backlash because we have so many embedded biases in our society. So with that in mind, we would like to express respect and value for all people and their perception of self. But in this, the point of this is to kind of define things to help the young ladies recognize sexism in the workplace and maybe take some steps to avoid or diminish it, and to also help the young men to be more conscious of unconscious things that they may engage in, and so to be an ally for young ladies when they see it happening. So we want to take the values off the wall and place and everywhere else we go, and so that we show value for each person. So with that, I'm going to begin the presentation. Sexism in the workplace. There are types of sexism. So ambivalent sexism is just a general term, and based on theory, there are two subterms related to sexism. So hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. So hostile sexism is really outright when it's clear that the person is diminishing the value of the woman in the workplace, and benevolent sexism may appear that they're doing something nice. So for instance, I'm going to pick on President DePero since he's here. So President DePero might say to me, Matricia, you don't have to come to this meeting. I know you got to go home and take care of the boys. It'll just be 15 trustees, so don't worry about coming. And so it might seem as though he's doing me a favor, but it could be if he's saying, you go home and do your girl stuff because we can handle this trustee board meeting without you. That would be more benevolent sexism. So sometimes it goes unnoticed. He let me practice this on him so I can do this right. So the two forms, so just be aware of it. People will always notice, or mostly notice, the hostile sexism, but may not necessarily notice the benevolent. And the person engaging in it may subconsciously engage in benevolent sexism without really knowing it. So this is also a moment to self-reflect and disengage in behaviors that you don't really intend to engage in. So this is kind of just a definition that I gave you. Ambivalent is overarching. And then we talk about hostile. Some examples of it might be statements and behaviors that generalize women as inferior. So emotional, not competent, unintelligent, manipulative, certain tasks are women's work. Women in similar positions as men, maybe the person getting the coffee. So because that might appear to be women's work. Making comments about having a husband who is the breadwinner, or promoting women based on feminine or masculine management style. What that really means is it depends on the perceiver. If they perceive that a woman is more effective by being nurturing and staying well within her gender role stereotype, then that kind of woman will be rewarded and promoted within the workplace. If the man feels like those traits aren't as valuable and that a woman should adhere to more assertive or aggressive behavior, then he will then reward that kind of management style. Again, it's decided by the masculine person, the man in the workplace. And then the benevolent, as I mentioned before, it might be positive attitudes of gender that are damaging to individuals. So if I get left out of that meeting, I don't really know what happened. I didn't have an opportunity to have any influence on the conversation or the things that were considered, although it was a good idea for me to get to go home and cook dinner for my hungry boys. So it also includes that the underlying assumption that women are inferior and that they should just stay within their gender roles. So like I mentioned earlier, it's subtle, unconscious, and sometimes it's just habitual. And so I already gave you that example at the bottom, but they might not say the same thing to Mike Kaspersky, who has a family as well. He might not be told to go ahead and go home and make dinner for the grandchildren because he is actually valued to be present at that meeting. So based on all of this, the theories of sexism, there's a theory called prove it again. Prove it again means, or the theory of prove it again indicates that women have to prove their competency repeatedly. So maybe you have proven that you are skilled and you're great at your job, but you have to prove that again and again. You make a mistake and it may not be readily remembered that you are a very competent person. Whereas on the other hand, for a man, once he has proven that he is competent, then he's given the benefit of the doubt. It's just an error. He's human like everyone else. And those kind of things, they use information that confirms the stereotype. And we all do that. We filter information. We filter what's going on around us, and we see it through the frame that we are most used to without even thinking about it. So you keep the information that confirms the stereotype that you have, and you dismiss the things that challenge it or go against those stereotypes. So men must prove competence, but women must prove it again and again. And then the interplay between gender and other characteristics such as ethnicity show in the research that women of color have to prove it again, again, and again, and again. So those things you should be aware of, whether you are a woman, a minority woman, or a man, so that we can create a better workplace for all people. What happens? How do you actually see this taking place? So what are the manifestations of the patterns related to sexism? Men are judged on potential. So you don't necessarily have to see them do it. You just have to believe that they can. Women are more often judged on achievement. I want to pause here and say this is not every time in every case. This is when sexism is present. These are the theories that have been proven. It does not mean that every workplace will be dominated by sexist people that invoke these patterns of behavior all the time. So I don't want you to think that this is always how it is. And then men's successes are associated with skill, while women's are overlooked or attributed to luck. And then the opposite happens when there's an error. So mistakes, that's a man's bad luck. And for a woman, it's her lack of skill. And then objective requirements. So that let's say there are a list of things that we can objectively apply as requirements, that women are strictly held to that, whereas men are given a little bit more leeway and leniency when those things are applied. So how does this impact, and this may be very relevant for the students, how does this impact you when you go out on the job market? What does it mean to you as a woman, or what does it mean to you when you become the manager, ladies and gentlemen, when you become managers out there making decisions in the job market? So qualifications of the job, what's important to any given job? So what the research has found is that less weight is given to qualifications when a woman has it versus when a man has it. And there's a Princeton research, piece of research that was shared with me by Dr. Kimberly Simone. And so I'll share it with you that kind of drives this point home. So we'll think about it from an academic perspective. So if we're hiring a finance professor, you might say, what is the most important characteristics? And so there was a control group and they were asked that. If you're hiring someone to teach at a university, what's the most important characteristics? Is it the education and academic training, or is it the practical experience? And so that I get the numbers right, 75% of the control group said that it was education. The education was most important. And then with the test groups, they then added names that would indicate whether that resume was male or female. And when the educational traits were attributed to the male, then in all situations, the group said education, yes, is the most important. When they flipped it and put the man's name on the professional experience, then only 22% said education was the most important when the woman's name was on the educational piece. And so it shows that, and I guess it's pretty subjective. In a lot of cases, we decide what's most important. And in these cases, in that Princeton study, what it showed with all of the test groups is that whatever qualifications the man had was the most important qualifications of the job. And we want to be cognizant not to do that. And sometimes that happens even with women. We tend to do that to ourselves. So we can't blame the men in every case and say that it's something that sexism is only that men are the ones who execute that. We often do that to ourselves. But a couple of other examples, there were 2 examples of people who transitioned, used to be a woman, transitioned to a man. One was an academic. So he was talking to his colleague, and his colleague said, your sister's research is not nearly as good as yours, when really it was his research when he had the female name. So the research was by both of the research was by the same person, but the colleague assumed that the research with the female name was not as good as the research done by the man. And then for a medical example, same situation where a woman was a very great surgeon. She transitioned to be a man and was talking to a fellow doctor. And in that conversation, the doctor was giving him compliments on his abilities and said that he had never seen a woman that was as good a surgeon as a man. Although he's now giving the accolades to the same person who once was the female gender. So there's real life evidence that this exists. But because it exists does not mean it has to permeate and dominate the environment. Part of the reason I think we're talking about it, students pick this topic. And so to me, that means you're concerned about it, either you've experienced it or you want to diminish the impact in the environment that you're going in. So understanding it is the starting point for doing that. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to take the time to define it and show you the different dimensions of it. And you're going to get many other points of view, but it'll give you a base definition, because we use words sometimes, and when we use them, they mean something different to everybody who's hearing the word. But at least right now, we can be on the same page with what sexism is, and we can all take steps to try to make sure that it doesn't happen. So being aware, I think awareness is the first step. We kind of have adopted a little slogan in the School of Business now, which is awaken, inform, and enlighten. So this is hopefully an awakening process so that you can receive information and then move along differently in the things that you do in your workplace, in your daily life, and in other places, because sexism doesn't only exist in the workplace. That's where we're situating it tonight, because it's our business retreat, but sexism could be prevalent anywhere, and we all can take steps to diminish its impact on those that we come across. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Matricia. That was terrific. I feel fairly sheepish that my whole understanding of the topic is, after listening to you, is pretty shallow, really. And I didn't realize. So it was really great to hear you. And I particularly liked how you opened up with the gender identity and gender role, and how important that is becoming, how important it always has, but it's certainly taking a center stage. So thank you very much. Next up, go ahead.
No, I was just thanking you for the opportunity.
Ah, great. Next up, we're really, really, really lucky to have Lori, one of our Board of Trustees members and a big executive in the big city, here to speak to us. So thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you, Michael. But I'm Lori Krupa, just Lori, and a proud Bana alumnus, and just so honored and happy to be with a part of this retreat tonight. So I'm here to hopefully represent our School of Business Advisory Council and some perspectives that we hope to share with all of you about sexism in the workplace and from a business perspective. And I think, Matricia, I'll pick up right where you left off, which is so much of this, folks, is about awareness, and it's about self-awareness as much as it is about awareness of the topic. So what we know as business leaders is that the Franciscan values that Connie spoke about before and that are on the wall, as well as the foundation that Banas provides you, is absolutely going to give you a guide as you go into the workplace around identifying and addressing both sexism as well as other social issues that you're going to face. I think the differentiator that you may not even be aware of yet is that your generation as students, you not only have the ability to identify and address these situations, but you have the ability to remediate many of these situations and really, really influence the corporate culture of the future. And that is true whether you join a huge company. Mike did say that I am a part of Bank of America, which is a very large worldwide company, or if you are a part of a very small family-owned business. You have the ability, your generation, to actually make a change here. So what I thought we'd like to do again on behalf of the advisory council is just to provide you some real life perspective around the realities of the workplace today. And the first thing that I want to share with you is the realities of the workplace as it relates to sexism and some of the other isms that we'll talk about is not actually very much different than what it is at Bonas. Because what it all starts out with is a community. And it's a community that's made up of a workplace is a community that's made up of many, many relationships. And each of those relationships are representative of differences, right? Differences in gender, differences in race, differences in ethnicity, differences in age. When you get into the workplace, you're going to have multi-generational. You have people as old as I am, all the way to as old as you are, right? But what that brings is a beauty of wealth of experience and perspective that you as new people to the workplace can really influence and learn from. So the workplace dynamic is not that much different than what you deal with at Bonaventure, but the relationships are a bit different. So what you're used to here is a student-faculty relationship, a peer-to-peer relationship that is around, how do we study together? How do we go and hang out? Let's go to the game together, et cetera. When you get into the workplace, you're going to have a manager-employee relationship, right? You're going to have peer-to-peer where sometimes, as Matricia said, you're going to be in lockstep with that peer, and other times you're going to be in a competitive nature with that peer, and you might have the exact same qualifications, but because of who you are, or whether you're a woman or a certain race, a certain sexual orientation, you are looked upon differently. So again, back to that awareness. When you get into the workplace, you're going to be dealing with business partners, people who are a part of your company that do different things. So again, you need to respect where they come from and what they are doing for that particular company that might be additive to what you do, or it might be in conflict with what you do. And then in some cases, you're going to deal with vendors. But at the core, at the end of the day, no matter what population, no matter what relationship you're dealing with in the workplace, there's a fundamental, and this is where it comes back to the Bonaventure experience and to the values on the wall. The fundamental with any of these relationships is that people want to be treated with respect. They want to be valued for everything that they bring to the table, including their differences. So again, that back to awareness and the values that Bonaventure has taught you and that you hold true to yourselves will absolutely make a difference as you move into the workplace. So another perspective I wanted to make sure that you had was you need to know that regardless of the size of companies right now, you will see that professional conduct, diversity and inclusion, call it whatever you want to, but it is a core part of today's corporate culture. So the dialogue that we're having today and the multiple perspectives we're getting from faculty, from the School of Business Advisory Council, from students, and from our friars is absolutely critical to you going into the workplace. So take this perspective from all of us as you go into the workplace, because as I said, no matter how big or small the company, this is all really, really very important. I am a part of Bank of America, and I thought I'd give a couple of examples for you to take away of how this manifests itself in our company. And it's just very, very timely because just yesterday I took Bank of America's professional conduct training. It's an annual training. It's mandatory for 200. This is just Art's laughing. It just was so coincidental. I pulled up mandatory training and what was at the top. And I thought, here we go. This is a sign, Father Dan. It's a sign. So I just thought, so what is, and just to give you guys perspective, Bank of America is 200,000 plus employees worldwide. Every one of those 200,000 plus employees, including our CEO, Brian Moynihan, takes his training. And here are the tenets. Think about these. Commitment to discrimination and harassment prevention. Number 2, respectful workplace expectations. Number 3, we all have a role to play in identifying and preventing harassment of all types. So that last one really resonated with me in terms of how we could speak to all of you. And the ability to play a role here, guys, in making a difference and identifying workplace harassment of any type, whether it's sexism or others, it really is rooted in your own personal strength. You have to come at this with a foundation of strength, whether you're advocating for yourself as a victim or whether you are advocating on behalf of others and not staying silent when you see something. Believe me, it takes courage to speak up. As I said, whether it's on behalf of yourself or on behalf of others, but you have to know that you come at this from a place of courage and that it's based on what you know. It's based on your values of what's right and what's wrong. And it gets back to, if you see something, you need to say something, no matter how little. Now, you may be asking yourself, that's going to be so awful. How am I going to do that? Be assured, companies have resources for you. If you want to say something, you always will have your direct manager to go to. That will be confidential. You know that, and you need to have trust in your managers. At the bigger companies and even medium-sized companies, usually there is a part of human resources that will have like an employee resource line that you can call, and you can identify something that has happened to you or something that has happened to somebody that you know. But either way, it still comes down to knowing that if you see something, you've got to say something, and you've got to trust the core of your strength and the courage that you have around what's right and wrong and the values that you have learned through the Franciscan teachings and through St. Bonaventure University. Hold those true. They are part of your core, who you are. Some examples that go back to what Matricia, these are not always big things. So I think too many times people think about sexism in the workplace or racism in the workplace as, oh my gosh, it's such an overt event. It isn't. You might hear of a term called micro inequities. Again, this is something. A micro inequity is, and this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. I'm in a swivel chair, right? We're sitting in a meeting. Imagine we're all around a round table, and now I'll be the micro inequity, and I won't pick on Dennis this time. I'll pick on Mike, but Mike is behind me, and I'm turning this way, and I'm talking over here. Well, Mike, how does Mike feel? Mike feels completely undervalued. I may be senior to him. I may be a peer. I may be a partner. I may be a vendor. All those roles I talked to you before. It doesn't matter. I just made Mike feel less than what he is. Another element, which this one I'm going to have to say tends to really be more impactful to women than to men, and I've experienced a bazillion times in my career, as I'm sure others have, is constant interrupting. We're trying to make a point, and we have a really, really valid point. And there is a colleague, oftentimes a male colleague, that is constantly interrupting us, or even better yet, then takes the same exact thing that we've said, phrases it, uses a few different words, but the concept is exactly the same. And everybody else around the table, including your manager, is like, oh, Joe, that is such an unbelievable idea. Thanks so much. And you're like, whatever. What did that do? What it does for me is it actually demoralizes me. So I'm a pretty much an extroverted person. I feel comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas. When something like that happens, I go into my shell. So what has the company lost? It's lost my creativity and my productivity for a period of time. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. One other example I'll give you, which is a personal one, and it ends up being a good one. It turns out good, but I just want to share with you how even sometimes people that you're really close with, how this can happen. After 9/11, I adopted my daughter from Russia, and after 9/11, I lived in Boston, and I wanted to get back to New York, or believe it or not, to the New York area, which would be closer to my friends and family who were in Pennsylvania. And I was the head of marketing for a division of what was Fleet Bank, which was a acquisition that Bank of America made early in the 2000s. And I went to my boss, who was a dear friend, and I said, I would like to stay with the company, but I want to move to New York. Now, I could have kept doing this job, head of marketing for this division, out of Boston very easily. But this dear friend of mine and boss thought that because I had just recently adopted a daughter and had become a mother, he had 3 children, his wife stayed at home, he perceived that I could not do the same job. So he said, we'd love to have you stay with the company, but you can take XYZ job working out of New York, which was a pay cut and a demotion in reporting structure. I took it because I wanted to stay with the company, but they gave the job that I left to a less qualified man who did not do as good a job as I did, nor as I could. But the funny part about it is, everybody, had I not taken that role when Bank of America acquired Fleet, I would have been out of a job, because the marketing function was one of the first to be looked at in terms of overlap. So sometimes some of these things actually do have a silver lining, but the fact of the matter is, you sometimes you take the hit only to rise up above it. And this is a situation that I was able to actually join Bank of America in a different position that allowed my career to probably be more successful than it would have been if I had stayed in the old position. So in closing, I thought we just would give you one final thought that I think you can carry out as you're at Bonas right now, but it really will lead you to a position of strength as you enter into the workforce. And the concept is one of social inclusion. And it means just a couple of things. Number one is be conscious of how you can act to make others feel included. You can do that every day at Bonaventure, and it's needed in the workplace. Number two, search for commonalities to connect rather than differences that divide. Number three, listen and learn from others who are not like you. And then finally, what we already talked about, if you see something, say something. You can make a difference. So on behalf of the School of Business Advisory Council, we hope that we've given you some food for thought that will challenge you today and in your future. And we wish you all the best as you enter in the workplace. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lori. That was fantastic. We're so grateful to have your real world experience and the experiences that you shared. I thought about two things when you were sharing about, the change rests on the shoulders of our students. And all our students are here tonight. And, I've had a long career before I came to academia. And in my mind, there's nothing more important than equipping our students to go out and deal with these challenges. And I think, to our students, it's no joke. We really want you to go out with our Franciscan values and change the world. So that really resonated with me. And the other thing that you mentioned about every person needs to be valued and respected, and I can't imagine when that's more important than right now, when we have so much division and so much animosity going on in the world. And we really, really need to make changes, So those 2 points really struck me. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. And now we have Diana.
Hi, I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so first, just so you know who I am, I'm Diana DeVito. I'm a senior psych major, been with the Foster Center for like 4 semesters now, and I was lucky enough to present at our last retreat at the mountain with Amber, but here I am again. So I'm taking it from, I guess, a student perspective, and it's a little different because most of our interactions have been peer-to-peer or peer to professor or supervisor. So it's a little bit of a different like power dynamic. So going into that, so as a student or peer, if you guys want to speak on this, you can, but if you feel like you've ever experienced discrimination with peers or teachers, like what has that been like? I'll wait. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I just thought I'd give an opportunity. Yeah. So one thing that I could think of, and this happened in one of my classes, is so I was in a class with mostly females, and we had one male in the class, right? So is a class on human development. So a lot of what we were talking about is like sex and evolution and that kind of stuff. And the professor would often ask for that male student's perspective on things a lot. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if it were a similar situation, but the class was mostly white and the teacher's asking the only student of color in the room for their perspective, we would typically perceive that as racism. So why would that be any different than sexism in this situation? So another thing that I could think of as an example is if you're in a peer group, even if it's just a study breakout group in a class, um, and like Lori said, you're just talked over or dismissed and your ideas just aren't being heard, like that's really, like she said, you're going to crawl back in your shell. You're going to not be wanting to input your own opinions in these situations. So both of these, I have had like real life situations as sexism in my life that I could think of. So going into the professional world, I don't know how many of you have worked in a professional setting. Most of the jobs I've had have been in service, restaurant, or retail industry. So it's been a little different than working in a company or a nonprofit, school, wherever you're going to go. So what concerns could you have entering that workforce is hiring discrimination, which, like Dean James said, is real. But another discrimination you could have as a female going into the workforce is someone might not hire you because they might think you're going to start a family and will soon have to back down from the position and you can't handle it. So that's just another way like employers can discriminate in hiring, which is true. And they don't technically have to disclose that if they're not hiring you. So you can't always even take action against that. And like we said, sexist comments and just harassment in general can be a huge problem. So how could you handle reporting this is just understanding who your supervisors are, what steps you need to take, if there is a hotline or reporting system, just being aware. And what you can do to help fight this is understanding the form. So that's why we're all here, is understanding how sexism can manifest. And again, being aware of reporting protocols in the workplace. And another important thing is understanding the workplace culture during your interviewing and training, because then you can almost understand if that's a company you want to be a part of. And it might not be as apparent when you're first starting, but maybe it is, and maybe you see there's only one or two girls and you talk to them about it, or if it's the opposite, one or two guys, and you ask them their experiences, and maybe you can decide up front if that's something you want to be a part of and help out with. Discussing with a coworker if you do get hired, if you're comfortable, if you have any incidents, or if you're just curious about their experiences again. Forming positive relationships with all genders in your workplace. I know the Friars will probably touch on this more, but just forming good relationships with everyone in your company is so important to almost break stigmas and just keep the dialogue professional and positive, and just break the barrier. It's not like a middle school dance where like the boys only talk to the boys and the girls talk to the girls. And like Lori said again, speaking up when you see it happening, and it might be really hard and you might not know if you're in the right or perceiving the situation correctly, but if you don't say anything, then it's just going to continue to happen. And even if it's perceived wrong, maybe the person making these remarks doesn't even understand what they're saying. So you have to assume ignorance until you say something, and the faster and more comfortable you are about speaking up about these things, the better it's going to go. And being self-aware of your own actions, because we're talking mostly sexism against women, but in my first example in the classroom, if it's a female dominated workplace, it can be against men as well, or the other way around. So it's really important just to be aware of your own actions, biases, and what you're saying to people, and just keeping it professional. That's all I really had to say about it. It's just for my
Diana,
students.
it's Lori. I wonder if there's a way that we could use some of the examples you just gave, and see if some of our other students on the line have had a similar experience, and one
Yeah.
that we could, that we could kind of help through, talk through as a group. That might be helpful to hear now that we've had your perspective with the backdrop of Dr. James and Matricia and myself. Any other students that might have a perspective?
Any
I can
examples?
share.
Yeah, Mary.
Okay. Hi. I can share a personal experience that I had. So, I'm actually an MBA student here at Bonaventure. When I was a freshman and sophomore, I had the opportunity to have an internship with a technology company in downtown Rochester. I guess to kind of speak on like all those experiences that other people have had, I guess one experience aside from also being female was that I was also younger than a lot of my colleagues. And like I had a lot of different insights than they did, considering that they were from a different generation. And I often found it very difficult to kind of speak up to, the ideas that I had. And I would start by sharing them slowly, like with my manager, because I really liked her, and she sat like right next to me. So I would just be like, Amy, what about like this, X, Y, and Z? So she loved that, and then eventually she really helped guide me through building up confidence to speaking up in meetings, because I was invited to a lot of, higher level meetings, which is really neat and a really great experience. So I can definitely speak on that, and it was also kind of tough at the same time, being a woman, also being as young as I was. No, so it was really neat to kind of have somebody like Amy, my boss, to kind of bring me through all that. So yeah.
Don't underestimate the fact that you're bringing something to the more seasoned community as well, right? You're just because of your age and coming out of school doesn't mean that you're not bringing new ideas to others at the table, right?
Right.
Age doesn't have a discrimination around ideas and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Mary, also, you see how Amy helped you in that situation?
Yep.
She was able to either create a buffer or an avenue for you to express your ideas. So as you get in that position, you can also then pay it forward for someone else. And that's kind of what we all should be doing, is figuring out how we can advocate for other people in the environment, as well as stand up for ourselves. So that's a good example where you stood up for yourself, but she made it a bit easier for you to do that.
Yep. Thank you for that.
I just want to add a take on that, and Lori mentioned it. There's sexism throughout the genders. Many years ago, running a bank, teller jobs were predominantly held by women. And there was a time when we had a lot of young men that were on a career path and became tellers. And unfortunately, the environment that the women tellers had created made it very uncomfortable for these young men. And that would be the fact that, they all did something together during the week that was women related, like getting, their nails done together, going out and doing things that the young men didn't feel comfortable or wasn't their thing. And we had a lot of training at that time to really educate the fact of just what Lori was saying and Matricia earlier, is you have to respect people's differences and meet people where they're at. And especially for many of you that you're going to be developed and I know so many of you that I see faces here on the screen, and I hope the class that we see over there is engaged as well with the conversation. You're going to be leading roles when you're out in business or any organization. And as leaders, you're going to develop into these positions where you'll need to create the environment that exists for your employees to thrive and to feel very comfortable. And that's part of your responsibility as well. Someday, more will be on your shoulders, and reflecting back on the fact that your values are very strong and you need to meet people where they're at and create that environment. So I appreciate the comments there, and realize that, yes, you'll see it starting out, but learn as you grow, because you'll be leading an organization in many cases that needs to set those standards and create the environment. So I appreciate that dialogue. I don't know if we heard, Mike, from anyone in that classroom there. I know I can see that picture. I don't know, Mike, if they can hear us, if anyone in there is raising their hand. I don't know.
Conrad, is anyone in your class want to make a contribution?
Well, as of now, I don't see any hands, or unless anyone wants to speak up. But we all hear you well, so at least this is the kind of participation we have right now. So we have very good connection, and we hear everything so far.
Are we up on a big screen?
Yes, we are. I mean, you are on the big screen, so we hear. I mean, students hear everyone and see everyone. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Diana. Yeah, I'm always so impressed when you just step up and say, this is what's on my mind, and this is what I'd like to talk about, and I need help with it. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to hear our friars, their perspective on this, and then we can come back and do some more general discussion. How's that sound?
That's great. Yep. Well, thanks, Mike. I'm going to speak for a little bit, and then Dan's going to pick up as well. So I'd like to talk a little bit just about stories and what kinds of things that we have incorporated into our lives, and including has religion, or does religion help or not help in this sort of in this topic. And you may or may not know that one of the foundational stories about the first people that's in the Bible are Adam and Eve. And many people say, oh yes, I know the story that Adam was lonely and God put a big sleep on him and took his rib out and made a woman out of it. And that's why women are inferior to men. Well, first of all, there's actually two creation stories. There's that one, which is the second story. And in the first story, God decides to create people, and it said that let us make people in our image after our likeness, and goes on to say, God created people in God's image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, he created them. So in one story, Adam came first, then Eve came along. In the second story, Adam and Eve came at the same time, and both are in the divine image. What's the kind of stories that we tell ourselves that can become unconscious and move further down the line? If you believe that people of all genders were created in the divine image, then how can one be better than the other? How can one be less than the other? They can't. And so taking a look at narrative, what kind of narrative do we have? What kind of narrative do you have? Does the narrative include being told you're second class and then you take it in, or that you're superior and you take it in? Well, you know what? That's one way of taking a look at a story in religion, a narrative. Now, the impish part of me likes to also note, though, that in that second story, that if God was creating all along and things got more and more complex and better as time went on, And if Eve came out of Adam's rib, well, doesn't that mean that women are superior to men? Just saying, you know? So anyway, what are the stories we tell? And what kind of nonsense can we back up by taking a story and saying this proves this or that? People are equal. And that's the bottom line. Everybody is loved and everybody has a wonder about them that makes them very, very special. And as again, I said, a different way of wearing God's face in the world.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Maybe a few more points. We hear a lot about Francis, I think, around the Bonaventure campus, and I love the statue of Francis and Claire. This is Dan speaking now, sharing on the path between Plasman and the rest of the campus coming over towards Riley and the Ministry Center. So we have Claire sitting there and Francis, and they're equal in shape and form. They're both listening to each other. They're taking time in conversation. She's not as subservient, nor is he to she. And yet Francis took some of his primary directions in life from Claire. When he was really wondering what to do with his life, he told the brothers, go tell Claire, this is what I'm wondering about. How do I do this? And she prayed over it with the sisters and the direction came back and indicating, I think this is what God is asking of you. That's one little vignette. Another one is, because we hear mainly about Francis, we may not know this about Claire, but Claire, like women in other parts of our world, and maybe subtly still in our own country, our setup is, and I think that's part of what we're dealing with here today, is objects purely. And in her world, she was behind her name and behind her person was the possibility of property and power. And her father and that family was going to get a lot of money and land if she married the right guy. And at 13, 9, she was already established in the line of what that might be like. In fact, we have a wonderful series of stories, letters written by Claire to a woman in Prague, Agnes, who was going through some of the same strain. Now that Claire is already far into being a leader in her own community, she's leading by example. We've been talking about that tonight. I want to go back to that simply. And she's also leading subtly in her own life by being dramatic. She joined the brothers. A sign that I love about our Franciscan life is we didn't think about equality. We were together. So the Heichetas that Brother Kevin and others have championed on our campus, that's really right here. And I heard it in you, Patricia, and I hear it in others people speaking. I loved it in you, Connie. I love being part of the movement towards these retreats. Remember Mari's energies early on this, Mike, when we started going on this in art. It's so important, isn't it? Because why? It's practical. It's not a lot of ideas flowing around. It's thinking women and men, thinking about how we go around. How do we go into the world, enter it, and change it? And that's a Franciscan disposition. It's not a Franciscan idea. It's a Franciscan practice. It's loaded, though, with Franciscan philosophy, and it's what Kevin's talking about. It's grounded in a beautiful creation story that asks us to understand we really are equal. We're created in God's image, and let's go at it, which is to say, let's get practical about this. And that would be a Franciscan disposition on the world, to be very, very lined up with practice. And so I'm hearing that tonight, and I'm really grateful. I think I'm learning a lot. Lori, you're not on the screen right now, but it was wonderful to hear you. You're probably on other people's screen, and you're probably off signing books or something somewhere tonight, Lori.
I'm here. Stop.
But it was wonderful to hear you speak, because I'm hearing real life. Diana, I heard real life. Patricia, I heard you talk real life, but you did it in a systematized way of addressing us and bringing it into us. Why do we, in the beginning, say, how do we take these values off the wall? Or we ask the question, are they off the wall? In other words, are they crazy? And I'd say, as I heard you, Mike, begin wonderfully, in our culture, you'd say it's crazy to embrace some of these. That's why we would. And Francis and Claire were both considered somewhat crazy in the world. They both broke with social structures, dispositions towards women and men, ways in which you would go about business and raising a family to create a new world order. And they are so admirable and left examples to many that it's not just friars that find them worthwhile today. So we're blessed with a huge heritage. And the simple question that I think they both leave with us, that I'm sure this conversation flows with, is it goes into the simplest question. Well, these are all great ideas, but what do we do with them? And Francis, when he received Claire, realized after 3 different monasteries that their church wasn't going to allow her to live a life with the brothers. So she had to live a bit different life. But actually, Claire, living 40 years after Francis, sort of stabilized the whole Franciscan movement. So they were companions on the journey, deeply companions. One of the most significant story of women and men together in the whole Roman experience, which really is very, very much sexist and aligned with one gender than with the other. I mean, the Roman Church, unfortunately, hasn't yet resolved itself around that. And it's going to take a generation of the people on this screen and others to continually, if you are part of that communion, continue to address it within there. And that's where I'm going. I'd say, where does this go in those other places, as well as business, where the concerns we have around sexism begin to become addressed and integrated into the larger structure of our culture? Our current politics act like they're separate from everybody and everything else. Our Franciscan values would say, no, joy is for everybody. Respect is everywhere, or it doesn't exist. Love is for women and men and a child and someone who's going through a transition. Peace, the whole world needs it. And boy, what a compassionate screen full of people tonight. You know, and Kevin began the story, and for me, that's where the story continues. And now it goes into our conversation with each other as Mike might take us there.
Mike, could I just follow up on Dan for a minute?
Sure.
Dan, I loved what you just said. And one of the things I just picked up is companions. For many of you that have been on the retreat in the past, and we're doing something different tonight, but you taught us a few years ago that companion comes from the word to break bread together,
Right.
to dine together, to
Yeah.
eat, share your bread, to break bread. So we are missing tonight that wonderful experience of us breaking bread together. So I just wanted to pick up on Dan and what we've learned at the mountain. We might not have had the physical connection and the hugs and the conversation tonight, but I'd ask all of you to break bread tomorrow with someone and take the message we're learning tonight and have that dialogue, maybe with someone that's on tonight. But I'd really encourage you to take this and find someone tomorrow, because with being so isolated right now, I think it would be wonderful to be able to just at least virtually break bread with someone. So thanks, Dan, for reminding me of that.
Oh, thank you, Connie. Thank you for amplifying it so beautifully. By the way, if you saw it, I did. Art was symbolically, but actually our meal taker on the screen tonight. I don't know if that was Nancy's soup you were eating or your own, but thank you. But thank you, Connie, because you're right on. In fact, that I think is the biggest gift that all of us, because we're all Franciscans here, I would say that maybe that's being patronizing, and I apologize for it, but I would say to join Bonaventure community is to one way or another begin to assimilate our culture. And you just named it so beautifully, Connie. And the primary part of it is companioning, and you and I are doing that right now. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Connie. That was terrific. And thank you, Kevin and Dan, for your remarks. I was thinking as you were sharing that what a wonderful way to sort of wrap up our presenters by invoking our Franciscan heritage here and our charisma of being Franciscan and the equality of everyone, you know. And I need to be reminded continually that of the equality of everyone. You know, I must confess that there are occasions that I think some people maybe are not quite as equal as me, you know. So it's really great. It was really great to hear you guys. Thank you so much. And I would like to just throw the meeting open for discussion. I would encourage you to use the hand raise signal if you are uncomfortable with just jumping in. Just jumping in is also appropriate. Share your thoughts, share what you're thinking about. If you're uncomfortable jumping in or even sharing on the screen, you can send out a chat. And if you're uncomfortable with identifying yourself for some reason, send me the chat and I'll bring the question to the group without mentioning who you are. So does that sound like a plan, everyone?
Mike, I'll start and maybe because again I'm picturing us at the mountain and this is when the dialogue and really the richness of exchange I think starts. So I want to pick up on a topic that we left off with Diana, which is kind of the age dynamic in the workplace. So if to our students out there, is there something I could use some guidance from you because I do have the pleasure of leading teams that are representative of multi-generations. So as you think about how you like to be led and what motivates you, male or female, can you give myself, Connie, Mari, Art, other business people that are on the line, some insight as to what motivates you to be a good employee, a good student? Help us understand a little bit from your perspective, if you don't mind.
Lori, I can definitely talk on that if you'd like.
Please, Rebecca.
Yeah, so my name's Rebecca. I'm an MBA student, and I'm actually one of the graduate assistants that works directly with Dean James. And I'm super excited to be here tonight. Thanks for everybody for what you've brought to the table. I think this has been great. To go off of what you've said, Lori, I think one of the most important things, especially, with this upcoming age group entering the workforce, is allowing us to have a voice. And I think that's one of the big issues right now, is I think there are some folks who aren't afraid to really speak up and say what they want to say. But there also comes that fear, that retaliation, that backlash that, okay, you're speaking up against, your superiors, like people who you're reporting to. And there's kind of a little bit, I think, of a barrier that's built there. And I think maybe working with, multi generations of people, whether you're a leader, a member yourself, whatever the case might be, I think it's just allowing all voices to be heard. So maybe allowing somebody a little bit younger, maybe like a millennial, like speak up and say like what they have in mind. I feel like that's just something that's really important, is allowing that opportunity and not just expecting somebody to speak up and say something, because they probably won't, just maybe in fears of, like I said, maybe like retaliation. I feel like that's something that I think is really important and something that I would want to see from, whomever I'm working with.
Well, that's great insight. Thank you so much.
If I can add just a little bit, and Rebecca and Mary both participated in this, but I'm participating with a group of colleagues in conducting a professional development workshop on what you're talking about, millennials now, from the classroom to the boardroom. And one of the areas we talk about is millennials as leaders. And it starts from how they like to be led, what kind of leaders they like, and then what kind of leaders they kind of want to be. And I guess I'm raising 4 millennials, so I can talk about what they like from that perspective. But I wanted to see does that hold true? So Mary and Rebecca were my first test subjects. They did a little survey for me, and it does hold true. They want a voice. They want leaders who recognize that people who are not in management still have something to share that they can bring to the table. They kind of don't like policy just for policy's sake. They want, if it adds value or changes the organization, they're all for it. and they aren't afraid of change. I think traditionally we like security and consistency, but if they're in a situation they don't like, they'll leave. And so some people have kind of labeled them as being non-committal, or that they'll jump ship and they're not committed to the organization, and they kind of get a bad rap for that. But it's really more about them kind of being true to themselves and trying to find a community, work community organization that fits that. And I think it's important for us, our baby boomers on down, to recognize that and give them some space and voice. And they are less superficial. Like, we do a lot of judging on perception, on what we see, and they do less of that. The tattoo thing is one of the big ones. And my son was like, well, one day it won't even matter because the CEOs are going to have tattoos. We're going to be running the organization soon. We're going to be the doctors, the whatever, and we'll all have it, and it won't matter. It's more about what you can do and your abilities versus the art. And so I think it's a mind shift, but with the mixed dynamics now with groups, millennials might be leading boomers in certain groups, and their perspectives and expectations of the boomers are going to be different than what we expected of them.
Oh, great.
Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Matricia. Chris?
I think I was just going to add briefly onto that real quick. So one last thing, because I know, Lori, you were talking about what motivates, kids of our generation to want to perform well in businesses once we are out in the real world. I guess the one thing that really spoke to me was given the opportunity to take initiative and to maybe almost like call something my own. Like, whenever I'm given a project, whether it's for Dean James, I also work for her, and Mary Coombs as well. Anytime I'm given a project or something to do for them, it just gives me really great pride. So I mean, I'm sure that stands true for a lot of other kids at our age group, but I guess that is one thing for me. Like, when I'm given the opportunity to take charge, it motivates me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mary. Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering if the panel could give advice. I teach principles and marketing classes, and I do group work. And in the last couple semesters, I don't think there's been a semester that hasn't happened where a student, usually a woman, will come and say, in the group, they're talking about topics and they feel like they're drowned out. They feel like they don't have a voice, that they're in a group with more men and they can't get their ideas across. And it just seems like it's not a one-time incident. And they'll usually do it through an email, or they'll pull me aside. And I know the advice I gave them, but I'm wondering if you could share what advice you would give to that student.
Can I say something? Lori mentioned in her comments about many times a woman at the table will make a comment and it'll be ignored until a man repeats it, and then everybody says, oh, it's a great idea. And I saw some people's heads nodding, so that happens often. One technique that I was guided on when I was younger to try to have my voice heard was, first of all, not to ask permission to talk. I'm not going to get into particulars, but many times women will ask permission in the boardroom to talk when men do not. And the other thing is to create physical space. It's very important to create your space, to not sit closed in, but to sit open, which is not usually a gender, it's gender specific. Most women are closed in, but at a table to spread and to create your space, which then creates your voice. It takes a little practice, and somebody might be laughing saying, it doesn't work, but it does. It gives you a little more presence. Now, it doesn't answer all the questions you were just mentioning about being heard, but those are just 2 little pointers that I've seen, and I've actually worked with others to help them have their voice heard and to not ask permission all the time. It's can sometimes be difficult. I don't know if those 2 little minor things might help, but I don't know if others might want to add to that.
I think it's helpful to give concrete feedback to actually give them concrete advice. So I think those are great things to share.
Yeah, and I would add one other aspect, which is, again, sometimes particularly if it's happened repeatedly with one or two individuals, sometimes, actually back to the point that was just being made, even the person that's it's happening to may not feel comfortable speaking out in the group. But I would encourage them, and this gets back to the point I was making earlier, it does take courage. Take a moment after the meeting, soon after the meeting, because it's top of mind, to go and address it one-on-one with that individual, because it does get back to sometimes awareness. There are people that are just not self-aware, period. And so they are not going to be self-aware that they're interrupting or that they've taken your point. But if you take them offline and just say, hey, Sam, by the way, in that meeting, here is just what went down, and here's how it made me feel and what I experienced, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. Oftentimes you'll find out from that recipient, oh my gosh, Chris, I didn't even realize that. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. Now, it may take 5 more times to have that dialogue, but at least you're having it.
Yeah.
If time's a charm.
Well, no, I think you're right on. There's something else that came to mind when you were talking, Lori and Connie, and that's I'd appreciate your thoughts on this, but I remember people saying, particularly for women, it's to wear clothes that are bright colors, wear reds, and wear other clothes, like a coat, a dress, or a sport coat, or something that is a brighter color, because it makes you more visible in the workplace. Now, I'm not saying every day, 365 days a year, but there are certain points where you want to feel more present, more, on top of the game, and be cognizant of how you're appearing, not just in the words you say, but how you look. So I'd appreciate your thoughts on that.
I'll start. So when I was a business student in our business school, we were taught to wear the business colors: navy blue, black, tan, gray, not those brighter colors. You want to be seen as a businesswoman, and you want to be remembered and recognized for your business acumen. Every now and then you might see a woman say, I'm going to wear my red power suit. But you kind of have to be careful when you wear that, because it's, what do you want to be remembered for? Is it what you had on, or what you said, or what you did? And I had a president who kind of was giving pointers on, is body language is important. Like Connie said, giving yourself space, but also body language, because your body language exudes confidence or not. Yeah. Even your hand, like how you hold your hands. And as one president, he made a point of always putting his hands more in this power place. And he talked about that, like how you position your body. It's also like how you come into a meeting. The most junior people usually come in first, and they're sitting there anxiously waiting for everyone else to come in. And that particular president always came in last. He would come in a few minutes out. If it started at 9, he'd probably come in 9:02, 9:03. So that it was more of a power statement that it was his meeting. And so I don't recommend you coming in late, but I think it's your body language. And if you are going to wear bright clothes, even with my students, I would say there's a difference between business attire, club attire, church attire. And when you're doing a business presentation, it should be business attire. You want to be neatly dressed, but that's not what you really want to be remembered for, what you had on. You want to be remembered for your contribution to whatever it is you were doing.
Thank you, Matricia. I know, Adrian, you had your hand up, yeah?
Yeah, it's all kind of part of this conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Adrian. I'm a faculty member in the School of Business. And so Matricia does have a lot of experience leading millennials. So, But I was thinking about Chris's question, and it makes me think about the importance of having female leaders that you can look to as examples. And even as professors, we are female leaders for our students. And I've had, every year I have female students tell me, I'm intimidated to speak up in the group. And what I usually do is I'll appoint them as leaders of the group just right off the bat. So it's not just assumed that a male person in the small group is the leader. And I think that helps kind of with what Mary said earlier about being empowered to speak up. So if I say, okay, Mary's group, will you share what you've been working on? Then the female is appointed the leader. And I think that helps them know that what they're going to say is valuable to the rest of the group. So I think that's important to me. And, when I've looked for jobs and when I was starting my career, I always look for female leaders because it's hard to judge a culture before you work there, just in the interview process. But if you can see women put in leadership roles, that's a good indicator that they're valued, that they're promoted, and that you kind of have a built-in ally and advocate. So I usually seek out female leaders and mentors. My PhD advisors were all women, and my advisor when I was an undergrad was a woman. And so I think that can be really helpful. But also men can be allies and advocates for women if we're struggling to speak up or if we feel uncomfortable. I think it's important for men to say, oh, we want to hear what Adrian has to say, or I know Adrian had a really good idea earlier, why don't you share it with the group? So I think that can be really helpful too. Thanks.
That was a topic of conversation I had with my wife tonight before this, before the retreat. We were talking about how do you find out in an interview or, when you're interviewing for the job, how do they really handle sexism? And, for example, how do you know that the women are paid equitably? It's very difficult before you get into the organization to know the culture, I think. I don't know if anybody has any crystal ball that they can see into answering those kinds of questions.
It's not a crystal ball, but a lot of people are now starting to go to things like Glassdoor, where people are posting comments about an organization they work at, and people that are thinking of going there will go into that program and read about stories or posts that people have put. And if it's a good culture and supportive culture, you'll get those kind of comments. If it's a culture that's not supportive or it's sexist or whatever, you'll probably see posts like that as well, and that can be informative.
Oh, how about that? Like Rate My Professor, which I have never looked at. I've never looked at. I just go do the best job I can, and I don't. But that's a great. What's it called, John? Glassdoor. What a great.
Yeah, there's several kinds, several databases or social media kinds of things like that. But the most popular one is called Glassdoor.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that.
So Mike, to the point of the salary, I mean, you won't be able to tell if women are paid equitably, but I think for women, you have to know your worth so that it's not necessary that you're trying to compare and get paid what the man is, but you got to feel comfortable that you're getting paid your worth. And there are lots of times, even from where I sit now, there are a lot of times that the men will negotiate. They'll say they want more and the woman won't. And in those cases, certainly I'm not trying to pay a woman less, but if she doesn't ask for more, should I say, oh, wait, let me give you an extra so that you can have the same as the man who negotiated before you. So I think for women, we have to learn to know our worth and don't be afraid to to ask for that. And sometimes women feel like I'm lucky to get this opportunity. And if I ask for more, then I won't get the job. And men will go out on a limb, even if they'll ask for more than their worth. And because they feel that level of confidence. And I don't know how we get to that. I think it's we're feeling like we're breaking glass ceilings and trying to get our foot in the door, and we don't want to mess that up. But again, kind of know your worth. And the one thing that would help is to have alternatives. So I used to, when I was in the classroom, I would always tell my students, men and women, always have alternatives. If you only have one choice, then you're that person has tremendous power over you because you are solely dependent on it. So know your worth and figure out how you can, don't be arrogant, but just know your worth.
That's a terrific advice. Thank you, Matricia.
The other thing I would,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike, just one thing to add on to what Matricia was just saying, it is in addition to the salary and know your worth, is recognize that you are your own advocate in terms of career advancement. Just because you have a manager, they haven't become a clairvoyant in terms of a mind reader of where you want your career to go. So make sure you're advocating based on your worth, based on your value, based on your contribution, what you want next, both monetarily as well as career move.
Terrific. Thank you, Lori.
So Mike, can I say something as well?
Sure, Conrad.
So, I mean, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us. And, I'm having my entire class here, and because we are running out of time as well. So can I just share one example? And some of you already mentioned, so we are talking about sexism, and of course, it's more often related against or towards women. But I would like to share an example. So one of my former students, in fact, who is of basically my age, he is working in the army. I worked in the past in the army. Right now, he is working in a defense industry. And in fact, he had a situation recently. So he called me for some consultation. So there were a few women that were harassed at the workplace. And in fact, there was no one to speak up for them. Even they themselves, they were afraid to speak up for themselves because they knew themselves. So there was a group of women, not just one, but he, as a male colleague, he basically organized them and made the case to the upper management, and he started a change in the office. So it was thanks to him that things started changing, even though again it was a serious thing. Not just one woman was a victim; there were more women, but they were not strong enough, or maybe not brave, or they couldn't basically speak up for themselves. So there was another man who could help them. And this is the message for men who are already, with us today. So don't be afraid to help if you can. And if you are in the position, even though maybe you don't have a managerial position as my student, he's a worker, but he was brave enough, to speak up and to organize others and to do something with this harassment at his workplace.
Yep.
That's terrific.
I follow Conrad's comment. Conrad, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so very important. We're discussing sexism in the workplace. And tonight we also have students that may be listening and saying, maybe this doesn't pertain to me right now, or I might not see this down the road. But I liked your comment, Conrad, because it goes back to the values that Dan and Kevin talked about. We're all equal and we're in this together, and we need to see something, say something, as Lori said. So especially those in the management field or the management discipline, these are going to be a good part of the issues you deal with on a daily basis. I'm giving you the heads up now. If you think it's all going to be about client and technology and service, I'm telling you, when you get into an executive role or CEO role, I'll tell you right now, this is a big part of what you'll be dealing with. So keep those values inside, men and women, because this will be your team, your people, and you all are equal. And I like that, Conrad. I really like that example. We need to make note of that because, again, it goes back to our values, to really be there for everybody else and to share that. And especially if any of us here want to continue to in a management role or team leader role or working with others. So I appreciate that quite a bit. Thank you, Conrad. That's a good.
Thank you, Connie. So, Mari?
I think, Rebecca, were you saying something? Why don't you go ahead?
Are you sure?
Absolutely. I'll follow.
Okay. So just to add to that, going off of like the values, and I feel like St. Bonaventure, and maybe I'm biased after being here 5 years, I feel like, the school does a great job, especially the school business, having those values right on the wall. I feel like a lot of the students here are different. And that's kind of the challenge that we might face as, new individuals entering the workforce, is sometimes having these barriers put up of like, nope, like this is how we do this here at our company. They might not value the differences that we do, especially coming from a place like St. Bonaventure, where that's like part of our foundation. Like that's like who we become as we come here. And I feel like it plays really like hand in hand. I feel like it's super important. And one of the things that always comes to my mind is servant leadership. And that's one of those things that I've learned since being here at St. Bonaventure, and in my multiple roles on campus, and especially and with residence life too, is learning to lead from within and not from above. So understanding that, okay, like maybe your power puts you above everybody else, but it's learning to be among everybody, understanding that you are equal, you are one together, one whole group, and not leading from like this hierarchy, like, looking down on everybody else in a condescending manner. And I feel like that's one of the things that I can definitely take away from St. Bonaventure, and looking forward and going off of what Connie had said earlier, is creating that environment for others, like letting it be known that like you are all one, that your voice is heard. I feel like that's something that's super important. So I just wanted to add that super quick.
Those comments make me so happy, Rebecca. That's great. Really. I know we're pressed for time, and I wanted to invite Dennis to add his comments, if he will.
I think
Sure,
Mari
I'm glad to, Mike, but I don't want to stand in the way of Mari either. I know she had something to say.
Well, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate that. And Rebecca, I'm so glad you went first, because that's kind of what I'm going to build off of. I just wanted to share, I'm Mari Snyder, and I currently work in a nonprofit organization for human trafficking survivors, and I made that transition from corporate America. So what I'm hearing tonight, if you don't mind me reflecting a little bit, is that I hear in the voice of our students a sense of a little bit of trepidation and a little bit of worry about what this is going to be like. And believe me, that voice sounds wildly familiar, even though it was 30 years ago when I was a 22-year-old or however old you are, sitting in those seats, because I felt very prepared, but very much surrounded by peers all my life, and parents and great faculty members that were cultivating a very nurturing environment. And I knew I was going out into a much bigger, complex, diverse environment. And what was mind-blowing for me is that in 6 months, I went into something even bigger, because I never saw myself as a big businesswoman. And so here I was, my career started, I was a communications major, but I started in sales, and I started at M&M Mars, which is a conglomerate, global behemoth. And the biggest thing that I would tell you is those first few months into the first year or two are, especially if you're at a big business, are going to feel unsettling. That's kind of the universal experience, I think, until you kind of feel like you're getting your feet underneath you, just like you did in the university. But it can be a really beautiful thing and a very fascinating thing. And you're right, Rebecca, everybody has a seat at the table. And I learned that when I went to Marriott, particularly as a hospitality company. You learn very quickly how to acknowledge everyone at a table, and you can give something to everyone at a table, even if you do feel like you're the most junior, you're the outranked, you're new here. And so I would just share with you to know that it's going to be a little uncomfortable, and know that it's not so black and white. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of shaping that will go on, and you will learn so much by osmosis and your background and your Franciscan values. so that, you know, when you do have a situation and we're sharing with you that you should address it, you know, take the time to think about the how. It's not just identifying something, doing something, it's the how you do it. That's where I think Bonaventure and Franciscan values show up so beautifully. And you will hear, as many of us, I'm sure, I know I've heard it, that there was a, you know, now when I was, you know, a global leader at Marriott, people would come to me to say, I just feel more comfortable talking with you. You know, I just want to run something by you. How could I do this? And I think a lot of it is because I took the time to think about something before I spoke it, before I acted on it. There are wonderful resources that Lori referenced, right? All those, you know, the people, the resources, the employee resource line, they're all great advice providers. But take the moment to contemplate and to use, you know, think about that every individual that you're going to touch to address that situation with love and respect and peace and compassion, because that's where, you know, you can then navigate, you're sustaining the relationships. So I just encourage you to know that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. That's growth. You are going to, we've all navigated it and we've come out the other side, and you will too. You all are very prepared. You have good souls. You have good work, and you will, you know, proceed down a path. But just remember that when you're wondering what to do, think about how to do it. And as soon as you hear how to do it, start thinking about the Franciscan values and recognize where Bonaventure and St. Francis and the Friars and all of your great faculty members have taught you to use that. You know it more intuitively than you realize. Thank you.
Maury, I have to play off of this, and it's going back to how Connie talked to Father Dan earlier about if we were on the mountain right now and we had this conversation, I guarantee you, Maury, Connie, Art, myself, we would be exchanging phone numbers. We would be exchanging texts, emails with all of you to say, if you need us, you know, whatever. So I'll raise my hand in commitment. Mike, maybe, you know, again, if I'll be happy to give you my contact information. If there's anybody, students that want to, you know, pick our brains offline, I will give myself to the group. To me, there's no bigger value than the one-on-one student connection. And we can't do that, you know, as we would breaking bread, you know. So maybe that's another follow-up that for those of us, to the point that Maury made, there are lots of resources, but you have resources right here that are very willing, and maybe we can figure out a way to keep the community going in one-on-ones as needed, as the students here need to reach out to us for any additional advice and guidance.
I'm very happy to facilitate that. Thank you very much.
Mike, I'd be glad to say a couple things myself. Thank you for inviting me. What rich conversation this evening. I really have to tell you, I truly enjoyed it. And, you know, special thanks to our members of the School of Business Advisory Council, to the faculty, to our great dean, who really add so much to our institution in so many ways. You know, I have to tell you, and I'll be very brief, but I'll say this. There were a lot of very, very good things and a lot of very good words of wisdom tonight. For our students, when you walk around our campus right now, you see all these new banners. And these banners each have a word on them. And those words are our values: integrity, wisdom, compassion. You know what? Our hope is that you leave here with those words and the actions that those words carry in your heart. But you go out to a world where everyone doesn't have that same gift that you've been given here at St. Bonaventure. You've got something special. So don't let anyone intimidate you. Have respect for one another. Have respect for the people that you work with, the people that you work for, the people that you work with, and eventually the people that work for you. Value them. And remember this, and I have to tell you, as you talk tonight, I couldn't help but reflect on, and I hate to admit, 40 years in the workforce and where my own personal career has gone. But the respect and the way that we treat one another in the workforce, the sexism in the workforce, where does it develop? It develops in the way we treat those who are our partners, our friends, our families related to sexism. I'm so fortunate in my own life that my wife and I have been partners. There have been many stages. She has been vice president of a company for a number of years. There are many stages in our career where she made more money than I did. But every aspect of our work together was as partners. We divided our day in terms of raising our children. She went to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I took care of our sons for all 12 years, from the moment they woke up, their breakfast, their lunches, put them on the bus, because my job required things in the evening. She went home and she took care of them after 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had the freedom to do my work. That treatment of the way we treated each other carried into the workplace in terms of how we treat people that we work with and what our expectations are of those that we've worked with, those we've worked for, and those that have worked for us. So it begins at home. It begins with your friends. It begins now. Those traits are what we'll carry into the workforce, and those will be the examples that you will show others. So I think you leave here with a great gift. Don't let anyone intimidate you. Respect everyone and value everybody that's a part of your life. So thank you for having me join you tonight. I really, truly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dennis. We're so glad you were here. What I would like to suggest is we have Brother Kevin or Father Dan lead us in a benediction, but then I will leave the session open for, further discussion or connection between people, whatever they would like to do. Does that sound like a plan for everyone?
Can I have 1 minute before
Sounds
we
good.
close? I want to say thank you to you, Mike, and to the faculty who join us every year, for the new faculty who are here with us today. And an extra thank you to our Students Advisory Council members who support our students, not just in this retreat, but you're on campus often sharing your insight. Students, you're very lucky to have this group of people who are willing to share their insights. And I am very, very pleased that Dr. DePiero joined us. Thank you for coming. You added great value. Your words of wisdom can resonate with the faculty as well as the students, because we all should be lifelong learners and continue to self-reflect so that we can refine ourselves and become better at what we're doing. So thanks for sharing that. And I know students, many of you were at the retreat last year, and there were many, many more students. We were under different circumstances. We didn't have COVID. I know you guys have Zoom for most things, but to me, if we can provide support and make a difference in the lives of one student, 10 students, 5 students, that is the most important thing. It's about changing and adding positive impact, having a positive impact on whatever students, for me, that I come across. So I am so glad that you are here. And because you are here, this was very worthwhile. We hope that it was meaningful to you, and that you gathered something from it. And if ever you want to dive deeper into it, I know the faculty members here are available to you, just like the SOBAC and I was going to say my office door is open, but it's really locked with a little mask on there. It says, make sure you put on your mask and knock on the door. But do that, and you're welcome to come in and discuss more if I can share or help you along your journey. So back
Yeah,
to you.
sorry.
No,
The
thank
comment, yes.
Yeah. Patricia, I so appreciate you and on so many ways, but again, the way in which you've led us into tonight, along with Mike, thanks an awful lot. And I have to go back to the wonderful women from the alumni crowd who, at a party a number of years ago now, came walking across the room, a couple of them said, "What do you think? Can we have a retreat?" And of course, being this friar from the mountain, I said, "Yes." And then right in the middle of this great Bonaventure party, I think to begin and bless the Swan Center. So your very building, the three of you, thank you, Lori and Connie and Mari. It was just like it sung out from there. And look at all that's happening and that's been going on. The students have been involved. Rebecca, you were outstanding tonight. So I sort of dedicate this prayer to you and others who have that uncertainty about you. I loved the way you drew us out in consciousness. I only can guess what St. Clair was thinking of when she was 11 or 8 and heard Francis preach for the first time, and then left her home in her mid-teens, probably, to follow him. And then later in her life, he was dead and she was still in leadership. And writing a woman in Prague who she never saw and wrote significant letters of leadership. And here's one to everyone here. So we hear from the primary Franciscan woman in our tradition, the co-founder of our whole movement and sustainer. So I thank our president too, who seems to show up everywhere and benefit everything by his presence. There's so many voices, aren't we? I mean, we're a community of voice that would ask every woman, every child in us, every man here, every person to not feel equal, but to feel special. I love the image that we are God's child now, as if we're sitting on the lap of a Lord who loves us significantly. And that whatever your deity is, that will be someone who would not only hold you close, but send you into the world confident, as we have tonight. Claire writes, "What you hold, may you continue to hold. And what you do, may you keep doing and not stop, but with swift pace, nimble step, and free. Do not stumble, so that even your walking does not raise any dust. May you go forward tranquilly and joyfully and briskly and cautiously along the path of happiness, trusting in no one and agreeing with no one if they are about to dissuade you from pursuing your founding purpose or might place a stumbling block in your way. God, open our way. May we open the way for other women and men before us and those who will be our companions on the way. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Father Dan and Brother Kevin, thank you for being here. You usually host us, and we really miss being up at the mountain. Hopefully we'll be able to come there again, but thank you for hosting us in this virtual retreat. It means a lot to have your support.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night, Kevin.
Stay well.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was terrific.
Yep.
Mari, I didn't realize you wanted to speak. I thought you only wanted to have Rebecca speak.
Oh, no
We're
worries.
good.
It all worked out well. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. You
It
did
worked out well.
Yep.
shepherding
Good job,
us
Mike.
through.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Wonderful. And Mike,
Good night,
we'll
Mr.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll circle
God
back to you with
bless.
some numbers for people. Some people have reached out to me and I'm having technical difficulty with the chat. So I just want to make sure that we get the students' contact information. I'm meaning my contact information to people.
You can email me, Lori. We've emailed earlier today. And,
will.
and I'll,
Yeah, I'm with you. Isn't it good? It's good. And it really,
Well, we have your
you have
email.
it.
We can share if you don't
Would
mind.
you
We'll
share it with the participants? Yeah, because it's terrible. I've been having such a technical difficulty muting, unmuting, and I'm trying to get to the chat, and I don't know what I'm doing. So
No problem. We'll make sure they get
I
it.
want to make sure that I don't neglect those that have reached out and others that might want to. Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Great. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night. It's nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you.
Yes, have a good night.
Bye bye. I can get out of here if I see it. I'm having technical difficulty, so I'm closing my laptop.
Dr. Gallagher, I just wanted to say thanks again for putting all of this together. I mean, this is my third or fourth year doing this, and I feel like every year I gain something new. So I just wanted to say thank you. I know this year is different being on Zoom, but thanks for taking the time to, kind of gather everybody, put this all together. I feel like it was super beneficial.
I'm so glad. Thank you for saying so.
Absolutely. Have
You're a
great
shining
night.
star, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.